Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again for another Film Fanatic show. Hope everyone's doing good. It's been a few days since I've done a video, so just had some scheduling issues, so I wasn't able to really do them in the morning. I was kind of a little bit busy the last few days, so hope everyone's doing good. This is a show about my thoughts on a new movie that's coming out. I think it just opened this weekend. I know a little bit about it, and again, this isn't a review. It's definitely not a review. Sometimes I see it on YouTube of where there will be a video on a movie that's coming out or that is out, and that particular person or reviewer will, you know, I don't know, kind of trash the movie, and you realize about 5 or 10 minutes into the movie or into the video that they have not seen the movie, and they do state that to a degree, but they kind of trash it and beat it up on in a unnecessary way, and it's a way of like, and then also it's a thing of where they will, you know, do it in kind of this I don't know, in sort of a mean nature to kind of get hits, like a clickbaity kind of a thing. So they'll use a headline, or they'll a text of how this movie looks awful or it looks like crap or garbage or whatever. So it's like a whole thing that get hits, and it's a lot of there's a lot of bullshit sometimes around that. The only thing that bothers me usually is when it's around a film that that person has not seen, and I've seen that a few times. But anyway, I just wanted to give my thoughts about this new movie that's coming out. I think it just came out. It's a new slasher movie called Heart Eyes, I believe. And I I don't know. I have not. Again, can't stress enough. I have not seen this movie. I was kind of interested in seeing it, because thinking back to 2024 last year, 2024 was a pretty extraordinary year for horror films. I mean, we had so many great movies that came out. I've gotten some new films on Blu-ray that came out last year. I got In a Violent Nature. I have that now on Blu-ray. I also have Long Legs and also Late Night with the Devil. All three movies I thought were really great. So got them from Santa Claus this year, and there's been quite a few other films that came out 2024 in the horror genre that have been pretty incredible. Nosferatu, amazing. The Substance. So going into 2025, there's like this. Horror is I think the horror genre is in a good place, and I think it's kind of riding this, coming off the heels off a really awesome year, a real consistent year. And one of the things I love so much about a lot of the films that came out last year was the variety. There's a lot of variety. When you think of a movie like In a Violent Nature, which is like a straight up slasher film, but has a really unique approach. And then you think of a film like, Long Legs, which is sort of a retelling of Silence of the Lambs, but with a very different twist. And also The Substance, which is a kind of sci-fi body horror film and is completely off the charts and is so different than the rest of these films that I mentioned. So that was one of the things that really stood out last year, was the variety. So I had heard, going into 2025, like, wow, what's coming next? Because I think like the horror genre is in a pretty incredible place. There's a lot of momentum, obviously, because of those films, and there's plenty of other films that have also come out. One movie I almost forgot, which I should not forget, is a film that came out also, Oddity, which is just incredible. Just an incredible film. I got it on Blu-ray. I have not watched it yet. I am going to watch it very soon, and I'm definitely going to do a review of it. And so I have not seen it on Blu-ray, so I'm going to probably do that very, very soon. An amazing film. But so again, and again, that film was very unique and very different, and kind of like an old school, sort of a ghost story, but to call it just a ghost story would be, I think, a little bit too limiting. It has a lot of different interesting elements, a lot of psychological horror elements, super creepy, actually a scary horror film. So, the horror genre is alive and kicking, and then some. I feel, coming out of 2024, which has been an extraordinary year. So I was curious, like, to see what's coming down the pike for new horror films. So I kept hearing a lot about this newer film, Heart Eyes, and I saw the trailer for it. I saw one review for it by Chris Stuckman, who is a massively popular YouTube guy who I do watch his show. I think he's really great. There's been over the years. I discovered him probably about 4 years ago, and I gravitated towards watching his show a lot because he covered, and still does, covers lots of newer films, lots of newer horror films. He does other genres too, but primarily horror films, and he does a lot of extensive coverage on reviews, lots of newer films that are coming out. So I typically, my wheelhouse of how I operate in movies that I watch, I typically watch, a lot of old school films, films from the 70s and 80s and 60s even and beyond. So I typically am like an old school movie watcher, but I do love a lot of newer films and I try to stay up on it. And one of those channels that I would watch to kind of stay up on new things that are coming out, The Black Phone is another great film that came out, I think in 2023. The Invisible Man and The Black Phone were two films that I heard about through his channel. For instance, like newer horror films. And so I would watch his channel for that reason, to try to stay current with new horror films and what have you. But I noticed a big shift, and again, this is just my opinion, but I noticed a big shift in his opinions because if you watch you know older videos of his, because now he's a director, he has a film coming out. He has been trying to become a filmmaker. If you've been watching Chris Stuckman's channel, he's been coming. He's been really has had this deep desire to become a filmmaker on his own, and he has a film coming out. I think it's coming out. I think it's coming out later this year. I can't remember the title of it. And so he's become like an industry person, and he has some big connections, and you know he has got a good like friendship with one of the best directors around, Mike Flanagan. I think Mike Flanagan might have been involved a little bit with this first debut film of his. But the thing that's funny is or just unusual is I noticed since he's become a filmmaker, his reviews are, even if he has a negative review about something, he has this very, I don't know, his whole thing has kind of changed. I think he's still critical, and informative, and he's really good at critiquing things and praising things. But then I feel like when it comes to things that are not necessarily movies that are particularly great, he's far less critical. I feel like now, since he's become a filmmaker, and his reviews are a lot more, I don't know, kinder and gentler now on films. His whole tone has changed, and he kind of doesn't really give a bad review of anything now. And he has said, since he kind of made that transition into becoming a filmmaker, his change was going to, he was going to have a very different show channel and a different outlook, and look at movies in a slightly different viewpoint. So it's a little funky, but even that, and again, that's just my opinion. But that being said, I still watch his channel. I don't watch it as much, but I still watch it because he still does lots of reviews of newer films, and he did a review of Heart Eyes. He's the only review. It's the only review that I've seen of this new movie, and I believe it just came out. And again, I have to stress I have not seen this movie, but I did see the trailer and I saw this review, and my anticipation to see this movie was like pretty, I don't know, kind of pushed back. This movie, I don't know, it's billed as a modern day slasher film. And again, I've always said many, many times, the slasher genre is my favorite in the world of horror, in the world of exploitation. I look at the slasher genre as like a kind of a subgenre in the world of exploitation. But I don't know. It's one of the problems. I've seen a couple of newer slasher films, and with the exception of which I definitely feel it's like a straight up slasher film in a violent nature. That's like a slasher film, even though it has a very different, unique kind of approach or narrative. It's a straight up slasher film. And I will have to say, one of my criticisms is basically Chris Stuckman kind of described this film as being like, he said it was really great overall, and he said it's like a very '90s inspired slasher film. And I'm not really a big fan of the '90s for films, especially. Music. There's some great things like Nirvana and things like that, Soundgarden, but I, you know, I don't know. For films and especially horror films, I think of the '90s as being a time when like films like I Know What You Did Last Summer kind of permeated horror, and I don't really like that movie. And there was 1,000 movies that came out during that time. The one exception, with the film that I think it was great, and I do love it, but I'm not a big fan of the franchise. Is the first Scream movie by Wes Craven. That movie really single-handedly, because horror had taken a big giant dip by that time, and then when Wes Craven directed and wrote Scream, it was really unique, and it really broke up the it really gave, I think it gave the horror genre a new lease on life to a degree. The horror world exploded after that film, and then that obviously gave birth to the giant franchise that is Scream, that is still going today. I do like some of those films. I really love the first one, and I really love the second one, but after a while, it just seems like they're kind of, you know, beating down that same door, and it gets too repetitious for me, and it's not as exciting. But and they're just kind of using the same formula over and over again to the point of where it just lacks any intensity or excitement. And it's a slasher genre, but going back to, I think this first Scream film is a great film. But other than that, I'm not a big fan of the '90s. I don't really own, without sounding like a total snob, but I don't buy really any movies from the '90s, particularly horror films. There have been good ones, but I think, in the slasher genre and what have you, it's kind of dismal. And this film, in this review, he was describing it that it's very much in that vein. And I did see the trailer, and the problem that I have, I thought the trailer looked okay. I'm kind of indifferent. I was excited to see it for a while, to see it in the theater. Now I'm not really excited to see it in the theater, to be honest. And the reason is because I just feel like the problem that I have with '90s slasher films is that all of the actors that are usually in a lot of those films is, you have you sort of have the typical tropes that we all know and love and want to see in a slasher film, where you have either a group of young people or a group of teenagers in some kind of isolated location, a farmhouse or a cabin somewhere in the woods, where and then there is elements of, well, really awesome kills. They get picked off one by one. There's some, sex and sex and death, which is always great. There's lots of sex. There's, you know, um, great kills, like real imaginative kills, like all those things that we want to see. But the slasher movies that I love, like they do all of that, and of course that's where the genre started in the '70s and '80s. But it's all like raw and it's kind of dirty and it's nasty and way, light years before the emergence of CGI. So everything was practical effects. Everything was really raw and nasty. And the problem that I have with '90s films is that all of the cast just looks, everybody looks too pretty, and it just feels like things are a little bit too sanitized. Sure, there can be room or areas of where there are some pretty good kills, creative kills, but it just lacks to me that really low budget nature. Everything seems glossy. Everybody, you know, the men and women, guys and girls, what have you, everybody looks pretty. And when I think of old school exploitation horror slasher films like Maniac or My Bloody Valentine or The Burning, like they're, or even Sleepaway Camp. I mean, there's so many. Mad Men. Just a couple I can run off the top of my head. They're all like they're all kind of raw and dirty, and but they're realistic because people don't really look that way, and they don't really carry themselves that way. So everything seems kind of artificial in newer '90s horror slasher films and kind of propped up. And that when I watched the trailer for Heart Eyes, I was like, yeah, everybody looks really too pretty. They either look like they're all like supermodels, and I didn't like that vibe. It just puts out that vibe of where it's like a cleaner, more sanitized version of the classic slasher film. And I want shit to be raw and kind of in your face and a little bit dirty and rough around the edges. And I don't see that in this movie. And when I saw the review by Chris Stuckman about Heart Eyes, it in all honesty, it was like everything that I don't want to see in a slasher movie. And again, this is coming from someone who is a massive fan, and slasher genre is my favorite genre. So, so I came away from watching the review and, you know, with being kind of indifferent, not really being excited, definitely losing a lot of enthusiasm. And again, I cannot stress enough that I have not seen this movie, so I probably will eventually see it. But I don't think I'm going to go see it on. I don't think I'm going to see it in the theater. It's a major, as far as I know. Hard Eyes is getting a major release. I think it came out today is Sunday, and I think it came out Friday. I could be wrong, but I think it came out Friday. And I'm just, the wind is kind of was taken out of my sails a little bit when I heard that, and then when I saw the trailer. I was excited about it before because, you know, I want great, fantastic slashers to come out and to, keep the genre alive because it's the best. And and I think what In a Violent Nature did was it took those classic tropes that we all want and love, but it definitely did something different because that film was centered on the it the story more or less being shot or told from the killer's perspective, which we've never seen before. And it does away with that whole traditional way of how, you know, how we come into seeing these people getting slaughtered. You know, so it has a really kind of unique approach to that. And I didn't really see that in the trailer for Heart Eyes. And then when I saw this review, and again, it's funny because like if you were able to make a list of things that I don't really want to see in a slasher film, like say 1 through 5, I would go down that list of 5 things or 10 things, and I'd be like, "Yep, that's not really what I'm into." So I just wanted to do a quick video about it, and for me, it's for me when I talk about movies, especially new films, and when I talk about the situation of going to a movie in the theater and then versus, which I don't do, but people stream films, or waiting for the movie to come out on DVD and what have you, or Blu-ray, and or buying it on Blu-ray. Like, as a whole, I want the film industry to survive. I want their, I think it's coming back. I think physical media is getting this really strong momentum from what I've seen, as far as the growing and this explosion of the boutique labels that have been putting out all of these super incredibly low budget trashy horror films. It's kind of unprecedented to the point now of where, I've noticed it in my travels of where I go to a, Bull Moose, which is my favorite shop. I used to spend, and again, that's part of the fun. That is the fun. That's the thrill of it, is searching through the bins and going through the aisles, just like music, is the discovery factor. But when I started getting really serious about doing it, I'd have to spend a lot of time sifting through things to like find those bizarre movies, or certain albums that I've been looking for, or books or what have you. Like, that's part of the fun. But I have to spend lots of time because everything would be kind of all put together. Whether it was like more commercial titles or independent titles, they were all kind of put together. So you'd spend a lot of time sifting through all of that. And again, that's the biggest thrill of it for me. But now what I've seen is all of those titles and films that I am, really focused on trying to buy, like the more obscure films. Now those films have their own aisles, like the boutique labels. And they actually are now labeled when you go into certain shops now. You have the boutique label section, and usually there, for the most part, it's wall to wall, all of these movies that I'm trying to seek out. So that's a big change. And I see that, there's more and more companies sprouting out. It was kind of going away 2 years ago or so. Like, it looked like, or a year or two ago, when Walmart decided to kind of cut all of their ties to physical media, and then there was a couple other companies that did it. It was looking kind of dismal. But I don't know. It seems to be swinging the other way overall. But I want to see movie theaters thrive, and that theatrical release. But for me, it's like, you have to go to it as a consumer if you're like truly motivated to support it, because you want to have that experience. So it can kind of be complicated that way. But anyway, I just wanted to do a quick video on my thoughts of this new slasher film that has come out, and I don't think I'm going to go see it in the theater. I think I'm going to hold off. But anyway, and I'm not sure offhand what else is coming out that I'm really excited about. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. 2025, I think, so far has been not very good, because I saw... The last movie I saw in the theater was Lee Winnell's Wolfman, and that was a really giant disappointment for me. And I've done a couple of shows on that. So we'll see. I can't think of any other films offhand that I'm really looking forward to. So anyway, peace, and we'll see you next time.